Thank you for joining me in my garden today. I'm Liz Davey, and this is a walk in the garden on NCTV, Norfolk Community Cable Television in Norfolk, Massachusetts. I'm in my herb garden as we start, and fall is upon us. In fact, fall is falling all around us. The leaves and pine needles are coming down faster every day. There's still plenty left, so I'm not in any hurry to start cleaning up too many of them yet, because there will be so many more before we're finished with the drop. We have not had a frost yet. It is now mid-October and still no frost. Our average frost date here is listed by the Weather Service as October 8th. So we're kind of a week overdue for a frost, but it doesn't look like one is coming in the next few days either. But we know it is coming, so it's time to get ready for fall. I'm starting to cut back a few of my herbs. I won't cut them all back right now. In fact, I will leave lavenders, rue, and southernwood because these plants are hardy perennial type plants, but they will need to be cut back in the spring. That's the proper time to do it. Sage doesn't get cut back either, and I have a nice sage here, but I can continue to pick the sage and use it pretty much all fall until it's covered by snow. I will cut back the oregano, mainly because it just gets shabby. There's a lot of seeds on it, and I really don't want any more oregano in my lawn. So that will get cut back and composted. And it usually doesn't result in seeds in the compost. But if you're worried about that, just put the seed heads in the trash. But you'll see once I get some of these stalks out of here, there is some basal growth. So I'll still be able to tell where the oregano is. I won't remove that, the growth at the bottom of the stems. I'll do the same thing with the tarragon, which is also on this corner, and some of the mints. And I have a few kinds of mint up at the top. Those, again, I will take those out. I've got a couple piles of compost. We had a compost project, which I'll show you a little more about later, and we had to move the compost that was in my compost pile, and you either use it or move it. And so some of it ended up here, and I will be spreading that around the plants once I have raked off the pine needles. But the piles are here ready to go. I'm still picking some of the herbs. We have rosemary, chives, thyme, sage, as I mentioned. I could pick a little sorrel if I wished. The basil's gone. That does not take much frost at all. There's still a little lemon verbena and certainly some lemon balm and lime balm. So all of these herbs can be picked. Last month we picked some of the southernwood and rue and made a little bouquet for my shed to hopefully discourage the mice from nesting there. But right now we're waiting for frost and waiting for all of the leaves to fall, and then we can start and do a major cleanup on the lawns. We do use a lawnmower to pick up the pine needles and leaves, or if there are just leaves, often later on we'll just use the mulching more and mulch the leaves right into the grass. I leave many of the perennials and herbs standing for the winter. The pollinators like to stay there, and we certainly need pollinators. And I will put, as I said, the mulch on some of the items, but most of the time the herb garden will just stay and hold for the winter, and everything will start coming up in the spring. Now let's head over to the perennial garden, which is in about the same state. Oh, incidentally, I will be taking out signs and plant stakes, plant labels. I usually label my herbs. I don't label every one of my perennials. I kind of know where they are, and I have a good map of them. But the herbs I do tend to label for anyone that's coming in and wants to see a little more about herbs. And I take those stakes in for the winter if I know what the herb is. And I'm sure I'll remember when it comes up again next spring. And I'll take my sign out. And also I have a sundial out and back, and that goes in the shed for the winter too, to kind of preserve its life a little bit longer. Any decorative items actually will come out of the garden and be stored away for the winter. I have to remember to use the deer spray in my perennial garden. The deer are here and they're going to stay, so we have to, if we want to keep things from getting completely eaten, we have to know what plants they prefer and use some deer spray on them periodically. I came out, I did not realize that they enjoyed Boltonia. I have some Boltonia back here, which is an aster-like plant. They don't generally like asters, but the Boltonia has been chopped at about a 1 foot level for about half of the plant. And because the chopping is a little higher and also very straight cuts, I'm pretty sure it's deer that snapped it off. I have a nice azalea out here and I know that they like that, so I'm going to be continuing to spray that throughout the winter months so that they don't completely consume it. I still have annuals in the garden, zinnias, and I've been periodically taking deadheading them. It'll soon, once frost happens, they will immediately flop and turn black, and then I can pull them out. Many people see the seeds on the zinnias as they form and decide they want to save them and plant them again next year. And you can do that, but if you planted a hybrid plant, and this is true of any hybrid annual plant, do not expect the same plant next year because it will not necessarily be the same because it is a hybrid. If it's a straight species, then it's okay to save the seed. Like my butterfly weed, that will come true to form. But any hybrid plant is likely to revert back to one of its parents or even a further relative. So you really don't know what you get. It's a good experiment if you're into experimentation, but if you want the same thing, don't count on getting the same one. This is Eupatorium chocolate, or black snake root, and it's still blooming just fine and often has bees all over it. They seem to like it. And we've had asters in bloom. The asters are now pretty much finished for the season. I will leave them up over the winter. In fact, most of this will stay until spring because most of the plants are native plants. It's kind of reverted to that. I have a few that are not, and one of them is the Montauk daisy, and I have some of that down here, which is getting swallowed up by the black snake root. So we either need to thin that or move the Montauk daisy next year. Notes to make in my garden notebook. Plants that I remove for the season would include the daylilies, and we have several daylilies. And once they turn brown, that foliage will be removed. And I'll be cutting back the iris. I've started already on some of them. This is one that hasn't been done, but I will cut the Siberian iris. Oops, sorry, bumblebee. I'll cut the Siberian iris all the way back to the ground. This one needs dividing badly. It's a hard job because the roots are thick, but we need to get some of it out of there and make room for a few new things. Again, I'm still saving seeds. This is the butterfly weed. We have a few roses on some of the rose bushes. I will not deadhead any of the blooms on a rose at this point because we want it to get ready to go to sleep for the winter. Having a lot of new growth on any plant is a danger in the fall because it's a tender growth, and when winter comes, that is a growth that can be killed by the cold weather. We don't know how cold it'll be this winter. If it's a very mild winter, things will be fine, but that's something we don't know. I have quite a few buds on this rose. The sedums have started to turn their dark rusty color. They start out pink, well, actually green and then pink, and now they've turned into this russet color. They can be picked and dried for decoration and used in Christmas decorations as well. I'll be picking some of those this week and putting them inside. I have in the back, the taller green plant is a canna, and the canna will be dug once it turns black, and it will turn black with the first frost because it's a tropical plant. I have others out on the other side of the garden with the dahlias, and they too will blacken and need to be removed. And I'll save the corms or the tubers of these plants in a cool room after I have gotten the dirt off of them and let them dry thoroughly, and then put them in a cool room for the winter. A cellar is a good spot, but if you don't have a cellar, which I don't, then any cool room is good. Some people use a bulkhead if they have a bulkhead. That's a good spot to store these things in. Again, I've taken my hummingbird feeder in. The hummingbirds are gone. They generally leave mid to late September. Usually it's mid-September. This year it was late September, but I have not seen one for a number of weeks now. So it's time to take in the hummingbird feeders. Chrysanthemums are still going well. This is one that's been here probably about 5 or 6 years at least. And I trimmed it back in the summer on the holidays. I pinched it back, and of course it's still going. Another plant that can be decorative are the allium flowers that are gone, but they are dried. And again, those can be dried, maybe a little spray paint on them, and used in fall or holiday decorations. One of the plants that I will remove from my garden, and I have several of them, would be the peonies. Peonies are prone to mildew, and you don't want it to spread, so I'll just tip those right at the ground, and we'll be pulling out all these stalks. And I won't even compost these just go right in the trash. I don't want to spread any disease, so anything that's diseased, removing it and not putting it in your compost is a good idea. And as you're doing this, you're going to find some weeds that have sprung up here and there. So we're going to pull some of those too. Try to get as many weeds out as I can in the fall. And that will save some of the work in the spring. We hope. This year has been so rainy that the weeds have really gotten a good toehold in a few spots in my garden. And I'm going to try to clean those up before the really cold weather sets in. Moving along, we're still getting some flowering on these little perennial geraniums, which is a little unusual. Usually they start to turn a darker color or kind of reddish color on the foliage as part of their fall colors. But this year we have a few blooms. And I have a sedum over here, along with a flowering grass. This is has a little reddish tint to it. And then the sedum, which is a low-growing sedum. I have the taller ones, the Autumn Joy, but there are plenty of different sedums available. They bloom in the fall, and they're a succulent type plant, and can add a lot to your fall color in the garden. Now let's go and see what's going on in the vegetable garden. I've started cleaning up the vegetable garden, and I've taken out the tomatoes and the basil and the beans and anything else that was gone. There were some peppers that were gone and anything else that was depleted. And we still have things that we can use in the kitchen. I have some lettuce that was planted late, and I have some Swiss chard and arugula, which is a very hardy green that will last through a first frost at least. We have a couple cabbages, some carrots and beets that can be dug. Broccoli that actually is better after it's had a light frost. And kale that can still be picked and used. But the main thing I'm doing in the garden right now is still some more planting, and it's garlic planting season. And so I have made a row for the garlic, and what I'm going to do, I have purchased some cloves, and I could also use some of the garlic that I harvested. But I always purchase a few just to see what some of the new varieties are like. This is a German garlic, and what you do is it comes as heads, just like what I picked, and you separate the cloves, leaving the skin on them, and then I'm going to just plant it down in my trench. And sometimes there's two in one, about 6 inches apart. This is a large clove. And this is a small one, which is still will grow. And once I get it in, I'll just cover it with soil. And I do like to put a layer of compost on, so I will be doing that once I get it settled into the ground. And I'll continue this throughout the whole row. And I'll use the garlic that I purchased. I've got several more cloves in these bags. I also have some Russian garlic. And I want to make sure it's well covered and kind of move any rocks out of the way. And then I'll put some compost on it. And then cover it with straw. We'll mash it down good, make good contact, and then it will come up either in the fall or in the winter. If I had planted it a couple weeks ago, actually it just came, I had it ordered. Had I planted it a few weeks ago, it might well come up before the frost or slightly after, but at this point it may not. I will cover it with compost and then a layer of straw, and then it will stay here for the winter. Be sure to mark it so you don't till it up in the spring when you're getting the rest of your garden ready. That would be the end of your garlic crop for the year. I had a couple garlic head that was left in the ground, and I noticed foliage coming up off of it, and it was starting to grow. So I divided those cloves of garlic that had started to grow, and I replanted them as a little experiment to see what they might do. They are small cloves, but I think they will produce a crop of garlic next spring. So I'm going to treat those the same way I treat the new garlic that I planted. I was able to harvest a few pumpkins, which I added to my decorations, but I will probably want to plant my pumpkins, if I plant them next year, a little bit earlier, because I still have a few pumpkins on the vines, and the vines are starting to deteriorate. I have one good-sized green pumpkin. We'll see, maybe it will mature. But things grow slower as these days get shorter, and they are getting shorter, as you notice in the evening when it's still dark. These are dwarf marigolds, and my goodness, they grew this year with all the rain. Usually they are about half this size, but with all the rain, they've been very happy, and they have dwarfed everything else. Again, we can enjoy those until frost, but once it frosts, they will be finished. And once I have notice of frost, if I'm watching the weather forecast, I will come out and pick any of the zinnias that are still going and the dahlias for bouquets, because again, they will be gone. I have parsley. The parsley will be picked so that I can store some inside. An airplane going over. And I'll be bringing in the carrots and the beets as well before a final hard frost hits. Now let's head back to the shade garden. My old compost system was a 3-bin wooden system that we built when we, actually I think about 40 years ago, and it gave us good service for that length of time. But eventually it started to rot out at the bottom particularly, and we were having difficulty keeping it together. So we replaced it with this metal unit that we purchased and had to move all the compost that was in the process of being composting, and then adding the new units, the 3 new units. I think I'll enjoy it. Each bin lifts up. It has a top. My other one was open. The top will help keep some of the things out that I don't want in, like sticks from above and animals. Although some could get through the grates, I'm sure. I have the first bin is for fresh green or brown materials. The second bin is compost that had been started in the old system. And the third bin is for finished compost. And I'll be digging some of that out to put around my plants and my roses particularly. Roses and lavenders as the winter comes upon us. This is after the ground is frozen and we want to keep them from a freeze-thaw cycle as much as anything. Now let's head back by the pond and check out the fish. The tropical plants have moved inside for the winter already. Some of the annuals are still blooming out here around the pond, but as you look at my pond, you will see the reason why you probably shouldn't build a pond in the shade of large trees unless you want to have leaves in the pond or net it. I've used a tripod from an old sprinkler, and I can adjust the legs because my pond has a shelf in it to hold up my netting, and I put net over it and hold it down with rocks. And I still get a few leaves in the pond, but it keeps a lot of them out as well. I have it up at an angle so that they can kind of blow away, and I can use my little blower too. This has been a great thing to have as just a quick blower to blow off the deck. This deck was covered with leaves just about an hour ago, and now they're still collecting. But this has been a great little handheld blower, battery operated, for quickly blowing off a deck. I strongly recommend them. They come, they're various models, various manufacturers, but something that's small and light and easy to use really helps in the fall when you want to clear off your front steps or your patio or a deck by a pond. I've switched to the fall food for my fish. This is good down to about 40 degrees water temperature. The water temperature is cooling, so we're in the mornings. Our mornings have been low 40s a lot, and so the water is definitely going to cool down, although the sun will heat it up some in the afternoons. But I throw some in for my fish. It goes right through the net, and they appreciate a meal. Most of the time, the colder it is, the less they eat, until in the winter they stop eating altogether and you don't feed them. Once the temperature of the water drops below 40 to 50, it's time to stop feeding the fish. And they will just survive the winter just fine on their own. I've left the waterfall running and the filtration system going. It helps remove some of the leaves that do fall in, and I can take them out of the skimmer. But I have my winter heater ready, and this is goes into the water, gets plugged in, and it will keep a hole in the ice. It's thermostatically controlled, so it only works when it needs to, and it will keep an opening in the ice, which ensures that the fish will survive the winter in the pond. These are just plain old goldfish. They will grow to the size that the pond will allow them to grow. They started out as 15-cent feeder goldfish, the kind people get to feed their piranha. But these we rescued them, as it were, from the fish pet store, and they have lived now for 3 or 4 years, and will probably make it through the winter just fine. Now it's time to go in and do a little work on some house plants and do some cooking for the Halloween season. I brought in my hanging basket of geraniums, and I'd like to keep some of these over for the winter. And so what I'm going to do is take some cuttings, and most of these can be cut. This one will cut a pie. And I'm going to cut them down low too, just the roots. So at this point I have roots, and I did bring a trowel in, and I have a pot of potting soil here, and the original plant is going to get planted. This is dampened potting soil. And then I have the rooting hormone that we've shown before, but it's a product that helps plants root. And what I want to do is, I can actually get 2 off of this one, I think. Yep. I want to take cuttings, and I'll dip them in the rooting powder and poke them into my soil firmly. I'm taking any blossoms off, and we'll take the lower leaves off of this one. And one more leaf off. This is where the new roots will come. And that's the part I cut off. We won't save that one. We have lots of good cuttings. And you can probably fill more pots than just one. However, space becomes limited when you're working with house plants in the house. Window space, because we want to put these near a sunny window. Not all of them will grow. That's why I'm putting them in fairly tight. We will see what takes root. And we'll have blooming geraniums this winter if we get a success from them. Here's yet another cutting that can be made. Always choose wood that's green when making your cuttings. And we'll actually fill this pot up. And then this is the original plant again, and I'm going to take this older part off, maybe a few leaves. And I can plant that as well into the new soil, and it too will grow a new plant. So I have a lot of things I can make with these other geraniums. This is a white one. This will be a white one as well. And again, I'll remove that from the pot, the hanging planter. Take off some of the old dirt. And we'll do the same thing with this one. Making cuttings, and again, we'll plant some of the old plant as well. Then I have a pink one. And the pink one I will put in a separate pot so that I can distinguish between the colors as we go. Now, the next thing is overcrowded houseplants. And this is a Streptocarpus, which has some nice red blooms in the winter, and actually all through the summer. And you can see I have a lot of little plants around a main plant. They've kind of intertwined themselves. And here's one that's rooted and almost out of the pot, and lots of old soil to boot. And a lot of that old soil is still in the pot, and it's old, depleted, dried out. So what I want to do is put these in small, newer pots, these smaller pieces. And I've got some clay pots, and I've soaked the clay pots in a bucket of water. If you're using a clay pot to plant something newly planted, soak it first. Clay pots will absorb water. They're very good for plants, but they will hold on or pull the water right out of your soil if you start out with a very dry pot that's been perhaps stored away. And I will add some soil, and then let's find a nice one here to put in. This looks like a good one. Remove any old leaves that are and roots. And this leaf is, we'll cut it for now, but it will probably be removed later. And again, the plant would have faltered throughout the winter with all these side roots. And I think we have 2 plants here that can be broken apart. You have to break them apart carefully and kind of follow the root structure. And you want to save as much root as you can as you repot these. I'll probably wash the old pot and reuse it, but I need to get rid of all the old soil and extra matter that is stuck to the sides. You can see it's totally dry and lifeless. So that needs to be, actually we can add it to the compost and it will ultimately refresh itself. But we need to keep these cuttings, and we'll keep them well watered until they've rooted well and established, and start putting on new foliage. And this is a plant, Streptocarpus. It has, as I said, nice red blooms. They come in several different colors. It is definitely a house plant, and it likes medium light, meaning away from the window slightly. On this table works really well. I have large windows opposite that cast a lot of light. It likes it a little less light, especially in the summer. If you have an area that's burning hot, it will burn. You can move it a little closer to the sun in the winter, perhaps on a coffee table 10 feet away from the window, but it does like a little bit of shade. So it makes a nice, very nice house plant for that reason. It will survive some shade. So look for it as you're buying plants, Streptocarpus. And I think I have a plant tag here. This one is a red one, and the plant tag is somewhere in the rubble, I guess. But I will find it and put it in with at least one plant so I'll remember what it is. Okay, now it's time for me to wash up, and then I'll meet you in the kitchen and we'll do a little Halloween dinner. Okay, we're in the kitchen and we're going to make a little Halloween celebration meal. And I'm going to make dessert first. I always have dessert first, but that's the thing that has to go in the oven, so we need to get started on that. And for this dessert, what we're making are some hand pies, and they're mummy hand pies. And they're going to look like little mummies. And I have cut pie pastry, and your pie pastry can be either homemade or from the supermarket, prepared pie pastry. And I've cut it into 2 by 5 inch pieces, and it's very handy to have a ruler in the kitchen. I have this metal one that I took. It's a Business Forms ruler, but it's handy because it's so sharp. It's not real sharp, but it will cut. So you can mark your things and then use it as a straight edge to cut your lines if you're trying to cut out something like 2 by 5 inch rectangles. And then I'm going to use some strawberry jam down the middle of each of these. And this is jam that it's a freezer jam. I want to get some of the berries in it. And we'll put a tablespoon or so down the middle of each of these mummies. And then I'm going to use an egg, which I've beaten 1 egg and a tablespoon of water, and I'm going to go along the edges of each of these with this small pastry brush. Then I have leftover pastry that I had rolled out, and what I'm going to do is make little wrappings for my mummies by cutting approximately 1/8 to 1/4 inch strips of this pastry. These are the scraps left over from the and I will crisscross it, and we're wrapping mummies. So we can put them across, and the egg on the edge will hold the pastry. So you can put them at all different angles, and that's what we want to do across the whole group. And keep cutting squares and pieces until we've covered our little hand pie pretty well. All right, I've got the mummies all covered with their wrappings, and now we're going to brush them lightly with some melted butter, just a light, very light coating. And sprinkle them with a little sparkling sugar. You can use regular sugar, but sparkling sugar is nice. This maintains a little sparkle. So we'll add a little of that to each one. And we'll put them in the oven at 400 degrees for about 20 minutes. And when they come out, we'll add some little eyes, which will make them look very spooky. The next thing I'm going to make is an hors d'oeuvre, and we're going to make a witch. And we're going to start our witch with a mound of guacamole. And you can either make it or, as I did, purchase it at the store. This one's a little chunkier than my homemade, but it will be just fine. And then we're going to turn this mound of guacamole into a witch. First I'm going to add some hair, and I'm using carrot sticks. You could also use broccoli, florets, or pretty much anything you have. And we're just going to add some hair alongside of her face. And of course, the chip or the carrot sticks can be consumed with our guacamole. And then we want to add a face. And I'll turn it sideways. I'm using a piece of red pepper for a mouth. For her nose, I have a small yellow pear tomato and halves of black olives for her eyes. There, she's starting to look a little witchy already. Then we're going to make a hat out of black chips. And we'll just pile these up kind of in a hat shape. And certainly you can serve more chips on the side. Kind of cover up a few of the carrot sticks. Quick, fairly easy. Let's get a nice pointed one chip up there. This is a good one for the witch hat top. And there we have an hors d'oeuvre for the season. And I'll move that over to the side. As we work on something as a salad. And what I'm doing for a little salad is making some jack-o'-lanterns. And I've hollowed out some yellow or orange peppers, and I've carved a face in each one. A little. Some people carve pumpkins, I carve peppers. And I'm going to put a little parsley around them. This is some of the parsley that I have in abundance in the garden right now, but it needs a little greenery around them. I'm just taking off the tall stems as I go, just to give them a little base. And I'm going to fill those with coleslaw. Right now in the garden I have cabbage and I have carrots. And so this is what I have used to make my own coleslaw. You could also purchase a coleslaw mix and add that to your peppers. Just another way of serving it. And a little bit more in each one. For coleslaw, I use my food processor to shred my cabbage and carrots. And then I add mayonnaise, a little vinegar, a little sugar, a little minced onion, and some celery seed. And that basically is how I make coleslaw, which we enjoy. But you can also use a mix, and you can buy the shredded cabbage already done if you don't wish to do it yourself. And then we'll just put our little lids back on. And get them in the right position. And there we have our salad. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is some burgers. And we're going to make some monster burgers. And I'm going to heat up my oil. And for my burgers, I'm using veggie burgers. And these are veggie burgers that I make. And they're bean burgers. And we like them. They're made with black beans, some oatmeal, some seasoning, some cilantro, some jack cheese, pepper jack cheese. So they have a little heat. And let's see about the things we need here while the oil heats. You could also use hamburgers for this, but these cook a lot faster, so that was one of the reasons. They're already cooked, basically. There's nothing in here that isn't cooked except some egg, and that cooks fairly quickly. So once we have the pan heated, we'll put the bean burgers in. I make several of these in my recipe, and I put them with wax paper around them in plastic bags and keep them in the freezer. And they make for a very quick meal. If you've been working outside raking leaves this fall, it's nice to have something you can come in and put together pretty fast for a hearty meal. I think our oil is getting heated. Just a touch of oil is all you really need. And we'll add the bean burgers. And we'll let those cook until they're browned on both sides. Okay, now I'm going to put the burgers on the buns. Again, whatever burger you want to use. Get rid of the pan. And then we have some dressing to do to make them into monster burgers. And I'm going to put some arugula on them. You could use lettuce, any kind of greens would be all right. Just a little bit. Put a few leaves on. And maybe one more small piece. Let's see, a couple. And then I'm going to add a pickle. And I'm going to leave it hanging out a bit. You'll see why a little later. And I'm going to put some cheese on, but we want to give the cheese some jagged edges. And add a little ketchup or chili sauce or something red is good. And then we're going to top our burgers with the buns. And we want some of this to hang out a little. And we're going to put some eyes on with toothpicks and green olives with pimento. Just a funny little dress up that adds a little character to your burger. And there they are, with their white teeth, red lips, and their tongue hanging out, and a few eyes. Now it's time to get our mummies out of the oven. These I had previously baked, so they'd be done. And you'll see I added eyes. These are available at the grocery store, down where you buy the colored sugars and the frostings. And they're little eyes that you can add to things. Oops. I'm working with a hot burner under me, so we'll put our hand pies back together. They're trying to run away, I guess. And then I'm going to add a centerpiece of some of the dahlias from the garden that are still so pretty. And I'm adding a few little pumpkins as a we'll put out some festive napkins and my Halloween frog. And here we have a Halloween feast, Halloween themed feast. Nothing too scary. And nothing too yucky. I'm not into that kind of food, but it's fun to do a little something to celebrate the holidays as they come. And so let's celebrate Halloween with some good food and some good fun. I'm Liz Davey. You've been watching A Walk in the Garden on NCTV, Norfolk Community Cable Television in Norfolk, Massachusetts. Happy Halloween.